In the quiet of a Tuesday morning, as the sun began to rise over Pine Bluff County, Calvin Rock was savoring his first cup of black coffee. Unaware that his life was about to take an unexpected turn, the tranquility of his ranch was shattered by a knock on the door. When he opened it, he was met by a man dressed in a pressed polo shirt and shiny leather shoes, who silently handed him an envelope. No greeting, no explanation, just a moment that would unravel a web of deceit and transform the very landscape of his life. As Calvin dug into his father's old files, he stumbled upon a piece of paper that would turn the tables on those who sought to claim his 1,500 acres through a forged abandonment claim, revealing that the thieves would soon find themselves as mere tenants on his land. Calvin's heart sank as he held the papers in his hands, the weight of the official notice pressing down on him like a storm cloud. The words leaped off the page, stark and unforgiving, declaring that his cherished 1,500 acres had been taken from him, handed over to a development company for dues he had never consented to, dues he knew in his heart he didn't know. He read the notice again, each line etched in cold, unyielding legal font that seemed to mock him. His name was there alongside, his father's, a legacy now threatened. And then came the final blow, the kicker that sent his mind racing and his spirit plummeting. In the quiet of the morning, Calvin stood on his porch, tension coiling within him like a tightly wound spring. The HOA had declared the land abandoned, a claim that struck him like a thunderclap. Just last week, he had taken the time to mow the southern pasture himself, a task that felt like a personal connection to the land he cherished. As he paced, his thoughts churned, and when Donovan Pike, his neighbor, arrived to borrow a wrench, Calvin couldn't contain his frustration. "They say I abandoned it," he said, thrusting the notice into Donovan's hands. Donovan's brow furrowed. As he scanned the papers, disbelief etched across his face. "They've lost their damn minds," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're not even in the HOA, are you? Never signed a thing." "My father never signed a thing." The weight of the situation hung heavy in the air, a storm brewing on the horizon. Calvin stood firm, his voice steady as he declared, "We've got the records to prove it." Yet Donovan, with a slow shake of his head, seemed unconvinced. "Priscilla Kavanaugh's behind this," he murmured, a hint of concern in his tone. The name hung in the air like a storm cloud. Priscilla was a force to be reckoned with in Pine Bluff Estates. Always polished, always in control, she wielded her influence with a ruthless precision during HOA meetings. She never acted without a meticulously crafted plan, and if she was involved, it was clear that this was no mere coincidence. The 1,500 acres at stake were not just dirt and grass. They were the legacy of Calvin's father, a heritage passed down from his grandfather, a treasure that held the weight of generations. Once upon a time, every fence post, every grazing pasture, and every live oak that cast its shade in the summer held a tale of its own. Russell Rourke, a man of the land, had woven his life into the very fabric of that soil. He'd endured the droughts hauling water with determination, mended barns after fierce storms, and raised cattle with a patience that only the rhythm of nature could teach. Calvin could still hear the echo of his father's voice on that fateful day when he handed over the deed. "This land is your family's backbone, son," he had said. "Treat it like it's alive and it will take care of you." The wisdom of those words lingered, a guiding light through the seasons of life. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, a sense of urgency filled the air. Calvin found himself tangled in a web of HOA paperwork that threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. By noon, he was already on the phone with the county clerk's office, the minutes stretching into what felt like an eternity. He tapped, his boots against the wooden floor, the rhythm, a stark contrast to the droning hold music that filled the silence. Finally, after what seemed like an age, a voice broke through the monotony. It was Angela Hargrove, a clerk whose name would soon be etched in Calvin's memory. With a clipped but controlled tone, he laid out his predicament. After a brief pause, she delivered the news that sent a chill down his spine. "Mr. Rourke," she began, "there's a recorded sale here. It was filed just last week. The seller listed as Pine Bluff Estates HOA." Calvin clutched the phone tightly. his heart racing as he demanded to know where in the records it stated that they had the right to sell his land. The pause on the other end spoke volumes. It didn't. In that instant, a chilling realization washed over him. This was no mere oversight. Someone had meticulously crafted a facade of legality, banking on his fatigue, his busyness, his reluctance to fight back. That night, the weight of the revelation sat heavily on his shoulders as he barely touched his dinner. At the kitchen table, he laid out the notice and his own deed, side by side, each paper a testament to his claim. He could picture every inch of that land, from the winding creek bed in the north field to the familiar contours of his home. By the old oak stump near the south fence line, a heavy thought lingered. The notion that strangers could claim it on paper, never having laid eyes on its gnarled roots, felt more like an affront than mere theft. Just then, the phone rang, breaking the stillness. It was his younger cousin, Troy Bingham, calling from 2 counties away. He had heard the news, and his voice carried a sense of urgency. "You're gonna fight it, right?" he asked. "You bet I am," Calvin replied, determination in his tone. "But I need to know how far back this goes and who else is involved." A pause hung in the air before Troy spoke again, his voice low. "If it's Priscilla, she's got people on that board who'll back her." In the stillness of the night, Calvin found himself wrestling with thoughts that refused to let him sleep. Each time he closed his eyes, vivid images danced before him: strangers invading the pastures, transforming the land where his father had once nurtured cattle into a barren expanse of concrete. It was a harsh reality, but with each passing moment, a realization dawned upon him. They had underestimated him, believing he would simply acquiesce to their plans. But Calvin was not one to back down without a fight. As dawn broke, he awoke. Not from routine, but because his restless mind demanded action. In the early hours, the land seemed to awaken, vibrant and full of life, even if only in his memories. He prepared another pot of strong coffee and stepped out onto the back porch. The mist hung low over the pastures, reminiscent of his childhood, and for a fleeting moment, he felt his father's steady presence beside him, leaning against the railing. A calming force against the chaos of the world. The Rourke land was more than mere property. It was intricately woven into the fabric of their family's identity. His grandfather, Jasper Rourke, had laid the foundation by purchasing the first 200 acres back in the late 1920s, a legacy that would endure through the generations. In an era when black landowners in East Texas were a rarity, and the struggle to retain land was even more daunting, Jasper stood resilient against the odds, faced neighbors who wished to see him leave, banks that turned their backs on him, and droughts that threatened to shatter his resolve. Yet he clung fiercely to every inch of his land. By the time Calvin's father, Russell, took the reins, the ranch had flourished into a sprawling 1,500 acres, a testament to grit and shrewd negotiations. Calvin often recalled the days spent riding in the passenger seat of an old Ford pickup, as Russell drove out to inspect the cattle, pointing out various patches of land with pride and purpose. Once, there were tales of a fierce storm in '72, a tempest so wild it sent a barn roof tumbling into the creek. Then came the drought of '83, a relentless dry spell that forced the townsfolk to haul water from the river day after day for 6 long weeks. Russell often declared that this land held no value unless one invested their sweat, time, and heart into it. That was the true measure of its worth. It was this very dedication that Calvin had devoted to the land for decades. He had come to know every fence post, each one leaning under the weight of years of weather. He could recount the exact spots where the finest grazing grass flourished, a testament to his unwavering commitment. After a season of relentless rain, he had come to recognize the place where the earth transformed into a canvas of red and rugged stones. It wasn't the ideal terrain for crops. It blossomed with wildflowers each May. As he savored his coffee, his gaze wandered to the northern pasture, where the boundary line brushed against the edges of Pine Bluff Estates. This was the very neighborhood whose homeowners association now laid claim to what he believed was rightfully his. When the subdivision first emerged, Calvin had paid little mind to it. A developer had acquired a swath of land next to his, erecting houses with tidy driveways, welcoming families who reveled in Saturday barbecues. Once upon a time, a father imparted a cautionary tale to his son, a warning that echoed through the corridors of time. He spoke of the intricate webs spun by committees and boards, entities that sought to grasp more than what they had initially acquired. Young Calvin, in his innocence, brushed aside his father's words, never fully grasping their weight until the present moment. In Pine Bluff County, the struggle for land had always simmered beneath the surface. A silent battle where families lost their cherished properties to unpaid taxes, dubious deals, or the cunning deception of relinquishing mineral rights. Yet, what unfolded for Calvin was a more contemporary twist on this age-old narrative. The Homeowners Association, devoid of threats or brute force, wielded a different kind of power, one crafted from the ink of legal documents and the fine print of paperwork. On that warm afternoon, Calvin made his way into town, eager to see his Aunt Gloria Rockfields, the keeper of their family's history. Her quaint brick house welcomed him with the gentle scent of lavender, mingling with the mustiness of old books. Every wall was adorned with framed photographs capturing the faces of relatives from nearly a century past. As he stepped inside, she enveloped him in a warm hug, her eyes immediately searching his face. "Calvin, what's wrong? You look like someone took the wind out of you," she said, concern etched in her features. He took a deep breath and shared the troubling news about the ranch, the notice, and the rumored sale. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses, a storm brewing in her gaze. In a small, dimly lit room, tension hung thick in the air as Calvin confronted the unsettling news. "That's Russell's land, your grandfather's land," he asserted, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "They can't just take it." Gloria, her expression resolute, retreated into the shadows of the back room, only to return moments later, clutching a worn, leather-bound folder. "These are the old deeds," she declared, her eyes glinting with determination. "Got the copies, the originals? Jasper kept them in a safe for decades." With care, she handed the folder to Calvin, its leather warm from her touch. As he opened it, the scent of history wafted up, revealing yellowed papers adorned with ornate lettering, each page a testament to the land's legacy. Each page unfolded a tale of how another piece of land became part of the Rock holdings, a testament to the relentless effort his family had poured into preserving what was rightfully theirs. Before he departed, Gloria placed a hand on his arm, her voice steady and firm. "This isn't just about land, Calvin. This is about respect. If they take this from you, they'll believe they can do it to anyone." As he drove back, those words echoed in his mind. The land was deeply personal. Losing it would mean surrendering the very foundation his family had fought so hard to protect, and it would hand a victory to those who sought to undermine them. In a world where power often blinded those who wielded it, Calvin understood that history had a peculiar way of embedding secrets within the fabric of the present. He sensed that he had yet to uncover all the hidden tools at his disposal. 2 days later, he found himself parking his truck across from the Pine Bluff Estates Community Center. This modest brick structure served as the meeting hall for the HOA, where, on Tuesday evenings, the board convened behind closed doors. Tonight was one of those nights. Having called ahead, he received a terse reply from the HOA secretary granting him permission to attend. In the shadows of the gathering, Mr. Rourke stood apart, a silent observer. The exclusivity of the event didn't deter him. He had no intention of blending in or merely spectating. His keen eyes were set on the comings and goings, eager to decipher the unspoken stories woven through expressions and gestures. From the vantage point of his truck, he caught sight of Priscilla Kavanaugh emerging from a sleek black Lexus SUV. She was a striking figure, tall and poised in a tailored cream blazer, her pearl earrings glinting like stars. There was an undeniable confidence in her stride, as if she owned the very air around her. Briefly, she exchanged words with a man Calvin recognized as Wesley Drummond. Their interaction, a fleeting glimpse into the intricate web of connections that thrived in this exclusive world. In a quiet town, a local realtor named Wesley, who had once brokered deals for the subdivision, stood with an air of unease. He glanced around nervously before stepping inside, as if the walls themselves held secrets. Meanwhile, Calvin's mind raced with a singular question that echoed in his thoughts. How had they managed to pull this off? The county clerk had confirmed that the sale was filed, which meant someone had crafted documents so convincing that the system had accepted them without question. Calvin couldn't shake the feeling that Wesley was involved, but he needed solid proof. The following morning, he picked up the phone and called Angela at the county clerk's office once more. "Angela," he asked, "is there a way to see who signed the sale documents?" He inquired, and she affirmed, but with a caveat. He would need to come down and request a certified copy. "Do you want me to have it ready?" she asked. "Please," he replied, "by noon." Calvin found himself standing at the clerk's counter, a folder clutched in his hand. The sale agreement unfolded before him, 3 pages long, each line etched in black ink. There it was, the HOA listed as the seller, Pine Bluff Estates Development Group as the buyer, and the signature that sealed the deal, Priscilla Kavanaugh, HOA president. Attention gripped Calvin's jaw as he turned to the second page, where the abandonment claim awaited his gaze. In a quiet town, whispers of neglect surrounded a piece of land that had been claimed to be abandoned for over 3 years. Yet anyone who had passed by recently could see the truth. The property was far from forgotten. That evening, Calvin picked up the phone and dialed Donovan. "I've got the paperwork," he said, a hint of triumph in his voice. "Priscilla signed off on the sale herself." Donovan's response was measured. "Then it's time you talk to her directly." Calvin's eyes glinted with determination. "Oh, I will," he replied, "but not until I have more than just a copy of this. I want her backed into a corner with nowhere to run." The stakes were rising and the game was just beginning. As the days unfolded, Calvin began to observe the quiet stirrings of change along the northern boundary. Survey flags sprouted like wildflowers in the grass, and one afternoon, contractors' truck sat idling by the fence line, its presence a harbinger of something brewing. Curiosity tugged at him, and he approached the driver, a young man clutching a clipboard. "You with the developer?" Calvin inquired, his tone edged with concern. Yeah," the man replied, a hint of indifference in his voice. "We're just marking for some preliminary work. They told us this is phase 2 expansion." Calvin's arms crossed defensively, a protective instinct rising within him. "This isn't their land. You tell your boss that?" The man merely shrugged, a half-hearted gesture, before driving away, leaving Calvin with a sense of unease hanging in the air. Calvin felt a weight in his chest as he realized the news would likely travel fast through Pine Bluff County. When something significant occurred, whispers would ripple through the community like wildfire, and this situation was no different. By the week's end, he found himself cornered at the feed store by 3 different townsfolk, each eager to confirm the rumor that he had lost his property. With a firm resolve, he set the record straight each time. "I didn't lose a thing," he asserted, his voice steady. "It was stolen, and I'm going to take it back." One of those encounters was with Frances Doyle, a retired schoolteacher who had called Pine Bluff Estates home since its inception, her eyes reflecting a mix of concern and curiosity as she listened to his plight. She leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Calvin, I'm not sure if this will help, but I've noticed Priscilla having late-night meetings at her place. Wesley has been there more than once, and there's also a man from the developer's office. People are saying they've been plotting to reallocate land for months." The word reallocate twisted in Calvin's stomach, a refined way of saying they intended to take what didn't belong to them. Back at home, he retrieved the old folder Gloria had entrusted to him. If the HOA could fabricate claims. In the quiet of the night, he found himself at the kitchen table, bathed in the warm glow of the yellow light. As he sifted through a collection of deeds, tax receipts, and land maps, a sense of determination filled the air. It was then that his eyes caught a glimpse of something unexpected, a small handwritten note, penned in his father's familiar script, affixed to a map of the subdivision. The words revealed a significant detail: acquired mineral and ground rights for blocks 3 and 7, dated back to 1990. Those blocks represented a substantial portion of Pine Bluff Estates, a place where dozens of houses stood, unaware that the land beneath them was still owned by the rocks. Calvin leaned back in his chair, the weight of this revelation settling in his mind. As the air in the room began to change, a sense of tension filled the space. The HOA believed they had stripped him of everything, yet they remained blissfully unaware that they had been residing on his land for decades. Before Calvin could take any action, he understood the importance of certainty, which meant he had to uncover the original documents that would validate his rights. The next morning, he set off on a journey to the County Records Archive in Lufkin, an hour's drive from Pine Bluff County. The building loomed before him, an old limestone structure with wide stone steps and heavy oak doors, holding secrets of the past within its walls. In a quaint establishment where the echoes of the past lingered in the air, a clerk named Royce Flannery welcomed him with a weary smile. "What brings you here today, Mr. Rourke?" he inquired. Calvin, with purpose in his eyes, slid a folded note across the counter. "I'm looking for a land rights agreement from 1993. Blocks 3 through 7 of Pine Bluff Estates subdivision should be under my father's name, Russell Rourke." Royce adjusted his reading glasses, a frown creasing his brow as he examined the paper. "That's going to be in the basement vault," he replied, the weight of history pressing down on them both. As Calvin trailed behind, the dim light of the narrow stairwell flickered, casting shadows on the dust-covered filing cabinets that seemed to hold secrets from a bygone era. Royce, with a determined air, sifted through the thick ledgers, his fingers gliding over the fragile, yellowed pages. After what felt like an eternity, he unearthed a grand leather-bound record book. With a flourish, he opened it to reveal the original deed transfer, meticulously notarized, signed, and stamped by the county. The words leaped off the page, declaring that Russell Rourke possessed the mineral and ground rights to those blocks with no expiration in sight. Calvin felt a surge of adrenaline as the implications sank in. In a quiet moment, Calvin realized the weight of his discovery. This wasn't merely a matter of leverage. It was a revelation that struck like a hammer, the rights he held. He found himself the true owner of the land beneath the homes, making every homeowner, Priscilla included, his tenant. Back at the ranch, he laid the documents out across his kitchen table, each paper a testament to his claim. He picked up the phone and called Troy. "You sitting down?" Calvin asked, his voice steady yet charged with anticipation. "Why?" Troy replied, curiosity piqued. "I've got the original deed for blocks 3 to 7. It's still valid." A pause hung in the air, thick with tension, before Troy let out a low whistle. "You realize what that means, right? They tried to steal your land, but they've been living on yours this whole time." That night, as the moon cast a silvery glow over the quiet streets, Calvin's phone rang once more, its tone slicing through the stillness. He glanced at the screen, noting the unfamiliar number, and answered with a hint of caution. "Mr. Rourke, this is Elena Vargas from the Pine Bluff County Chronicle." The voice on the other end introduced herself. "I'm working on a story about a dispute between you and the HOA. Would you be willing to comment?" Calvin's brow furrowed, curiosity piqued. "It depends on what you've heard," he replied, his voice steady. "I've heard your land was sold to a developer for unpaid dues," she continued. "But I've also heard you never joined the HOA." "That's correct," Calvin confirmed, a sense of resolve in his tone. "And I've got proof they had no right to touch my land." Elena leaned in, eager for more, but Calvin remained tight-lipped, his responses clipped and measured. He was cautious, unwilling to reveal too much too soon. Yet, the presence of the local paper lurking nearby hinted that the tale was already escaping the shadows. As the days unfolded, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. One morning, Calvin stumbled upon a newly affixed no trespassing sign, stark against the fence line that separated his property from the subdivision. The wood was unweathered, the letters hastily scrawled in black spray paint, a stark contrast to the polished signs of the past. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the county, Calvin found himself reflecting on the day's events. Earlier, he had been busy stenciling the official signs, a task that felt mundane, yet important. Later that afternoon, while driving through a quiet neighborhood, he noticed a cluster of HOA board members huddled together in a driveway. Their hushed tones fell silent as he passed, their eyes locking onto him with an unsettling intensity. Among them, Graham Fielding offered a thin smile, one that seemed to carry an unspoken tension. That evening, Donovan made an unexpected visit, his demeanor tinged with unease. "They're nervous," he said, his voice low. "I've been hearing chatter from a buddy who lives in the estates. Priscilla's been spreading rumors, claiming you're stirring up trouble just to block development. She's framing you as a roadblock to progress." Calvin muttered to himself about the notion of progress, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. It certainly wasn't for the people losing their homes to the relentless rise of taxes and HOA fees. He understood their game all too well. Twist the story, control the narrative, and paint the wronged as the villain. But this time he felt a flicker of hope. The facts were on his side. If he played his cards right, the truth would emerge, shining brightly in a way they couldn't bury. One afternoon, while inspecting the fence along the north pasture, Calvin's gaze fell upon a man in a suit standing near the corner lot. Recognition sparked within him. He recalled Francis Doyle's description of the man vividly. In a quiet moment, Calvin, a representative of the developers, approached with a measured pace. "Can I help you?" inquired, his voice steady. The man before him offered a polite yet cautious smile. "Just here to inspect some property," he replied. "This is my property," Calvin stated plainly, a hint of authority in his tone. The man's gaze fell to his clipboard, and he responded, "According to our records," but Calvin interrupted, his voice firm, "Your records are wrong. Ow! And you'll want to fix that before you find yourself on the wrong side of a courtroom." Man fell silent, closing his folder with a sense of resignation before turning back toward his car. Calvin stood there, watching as the vehicle pulled away, the tension lingering in the air. In the quiet of the evening, Calvin felt the burden of his decision pressing down on him, much like a rifle poised for action. He had been patient, meticulously collecting information and maintaining his composure. But the winds of change were beginning to stir. The HOA and their supporters believed they were in control, blissfully unaware that their foundation was crumbling beneath them. Yet, before Calvin could make his first public statement, he knew he needed to speak with Priscilla directly. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting elongated shadows, he parked his truck outside the Kavanaugh home, ready for the conversation that could alter everything. In the heart of Pine Bluff Estates, where manicured lawns stretched like a green carpet, Priscilla's two-story brick home proudly occupied the corner of Rosemont Drive. Each shrub was sculpted to perfection, and the porch sconces radiated a warm glow, inviting yet guarded. Earlier that day, Calvin had reached out, leaving a message with her assistant, expressing his desire for a face-to-face conversation. Though she had chosen silence, he understood that his arrival would leave her with little option. As he stepped out of his truck, he noticed a flicker of movement behind the sheer curtains of the front window. Moments later, the door creaked open, revealing the tension that hung in the air. Priscilla stood at the threshold, one hand resting on the doorframe, while the other held a crystal glass of white wine. "Mr. Roque," she said, her tone polite yet sharp. "I wasn't expecting visitors." Calvin met her gaze, his expression steady. "I figured you wouldn't mind seeing as you've been handling my business without my consent." Her eyes flickered for just a moment before she gestured him toward the porch. "I'll give you 5 minutes." They stood together, the low hum of sprinklers providing a backdrop to the tension. "You sold my land," Calvin began, his voice steady. "You knew I wasn't part of your HOA." As Priscilla savored her wine, a tension hung in the air, thick and palpable. The land, rich with history, seemed a whisper of untapped potential. Yet Calvin's words cut through the silence like a sharp blade. "You filed that sale as if I'd abandoned it," he declared, his voice steady, yet laced with an undercurrent of frustration. "My family has tended to that land for nearly a century." Priscilla's eyes widened, the glass hovering midair as the weight of his claim settled in. "You've been sitting on property that belongs to me, blocks 3 through 7. I own the ground you live on, Priscilla." The revelation hung between them, heavy and undeniable. Calvin, with a determined flick of his wrist, revealed a folded copy of the original 1993 deed, a tangible piece of history that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a document and extended it toward her. She glanced at it swiftly, her calm demeanor faltering just enough for him to catch the subtle tension in her shoulders. "That's a technicality," she replied at last, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's the law," Calvin countered, determination in his tone. "If you don't reverse what you've done, I'll start exercising my landlord rights, evictions, rent demands. Whatever it takes." Priscilla's expression hardened, her resolve unyielding. "You're bluffing." Calvin took a step back, toward his truck, a smirk playing on his lips. "We'll find out soon enough." That night, Calvin stepped through the door of his home, a sense of purpose guiding his movements. He laid his father's documents across the kitchen table, determined to leave no stone unturned in his quest for clarity. Gloria's old folder revealed itself as a trove of history tax payments stretching back decades, mineral rights agreements, and boundary surveys that whispered tales of the past. Yet, amidst the organized chaos, one envelope drew his gaze. Its surface bore the familiar scrawl of Russell, marked simply with the words HOA, property deal. Curiosity piqued. He opened it to find a letter from a man named Charles Behrens, the very developer who had once breathed life into Pine Bluff Estates. In April of 1990, a significant document emerged, revealing that a land swap had taken place to facilitate the layout of the subdivision's roads. Russell Rourke had been granted the underlying rights to certain blocks for eternity, a fact underscored by a hand-drawn map that Charles had meticulously crafted, pinpointing the exact plots. Calvin leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly, realizing the weight of this revelation. This wasn't merely a bargaining chip, it was a solid foundation. The very existence of the HOA was intertwined with a deal that positioned his father as their landlord. The following day, he reached out to Troy, determination in his voice. "I'm ready to move," Calvin declared. "You certain?" "Once you take this step, there's no turning back," Troy replied, his voice steady. "I've been certain since the day they attempted to take my land. I hold the paperwork that will dismantle their entire argument." Before making his move, Calvin reached out to Alina from the Chronicle. "I have something you'll want to see," he said, a hint of urgency in his tone. "But I'll only show you if you promise to run the story straight, no spin." "I'm listening," she responded, intrigued. They met at a diner off Highway 287, a place where secrets could be exchanged over coffee. Calvin slid the envelope across the table, and as Alina opened it, she began to read through the documents, her eyes widening with each revelation. Her eyes widened, and she murmured, "This changes everything." If this was valid, the HOA's actions could backfire spectacularly. "It's valid," Calvin replied, determination in his voice. "Every page. I want people to know what really happened before they try to paint me as some bitter rancher holding up progress." By the time Calvin left the diner, he felt the weight of time pressing down on him. Once Elena's story hit the front page, the HOA would scramble to control the damage. But he wasn't worried. He'd waited patiently, gathering facts, letting them believe they had him cornered. He climbed back into his truck, casting a glance toward the distant subdivision. It was a place shrouded in silence, where secrets had been stolen behind a veil of legal jargon and closed-door meetings. Now, the tides were shifting. But before the truth could break free, Calvin had to plan a single, powerful legal move that would strike harder than anything they could have anticipated. By Monday morning, he had already signed the papers with his attorney, Red Jameson. Tall and silver-haired, Red possessed a calm voice that commanded respect in the courtroom. As they leaned forward in their chairs, Red, a specialist in property disputes, listened intently. Calvin laid out the facts without hesitation, cutting through any pretense. "They went after the wrong man," Reed declared, flipping through the documents with purpose. "We'll file a petition to void the sale immediately. But I also recommend we initiate landlord action on blocks 3 through 7 that will make them realize just how deep this goes." Calvin nodded, determination in his eyes. "I'm ready." The petition was filed that very afternoon, but Calvin felt a lingering need. He wanted to look Priscilla in the eye one more time. In a scene where shadows of uncertainty loomed, she found herself without the familiar refuge of her porch and a glass of wine. The HOA had summoned its members for their monthly gathering on a Tuesday evening. Despite previous attempts to keep him at bay, Calvin made his entrance early, standing resolutely by the entrance. A few board members cast him wary looks as they filed in. Priscilla, the last to arrive, emerged from her Lexus, exuding her usual air of confidence. However, upon catching sight of Calvin, her stride faltered. "This is a members-only meeting," she stated coolly, her voice steady. "I'm here. As your landlord?" Calvin stood firm, a certified copy of the 1993 deed clutched in his hand. The words he spoke struck like a hammer, causing a few members to halt in their tracks, exchanging bewildered glances. Priscilla attempted to brush past him, but Calvin was relentless, following her inside. "Since we're being formal, let's put this on the record," he declared. "You tried to sell my land under false claims, yet you've been living on mine for 30 years. That means you and everyone in blocks 7 have been my tenants without even realizing it." The atmosphere in the room shifted, growing heavy with tension as Wesley Drummond's jaw worked silently, grappling with the revelation. He seemed to be on a quest for the perfect words, a task that felt almost ridiculous. "That's absurd," he finally declared. "The subdivision," he insisted, "had been constructed fairly, according to the original agreement." Calvin slid the document across the table, his voice steady. "Your fair and square sits on Rockland, my land." Priscilla's tone cut through the air, sharp and unwavering. "Do you really think you can intimidate us with old paperwork? This is a community, Mr. Rourke. People have built their lives here, and my family has established ours on the ranch you just attempted to take." Calvin shot back, his resolve unyielding. "The difference is, I have the law on my side." In the dimly lit room, an air of unease settled like a thick fog. A few board members shuffled through the deed, their voices barely above a whisper. Among them was Clinton Avery, who suddenly lifted his gaze, his voice low and tense. "Holds up in court, we're in trouble," he murmured. Priscilla shot him a look sharp enough to slice through steel. "We'll see what a judge says," she retorted, her tone icy. Calvin, unfazed, stepped toward the door, a smirk playing on his lips. "And in the meantime, you might want to warn your neighbors to expect some letters in the mail tomorrow." With that, Reed prepared to file the landlord notices, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air. It was not yet the moment of eviction, but the air was thick with tension as formal demands for rent arrived, each one backdated 3 months. Each envelope bore Calvin's name, accompanied by the legal description of the land beneath the homes. Within 2 days, the phone at Calvin's ranch erupted into a cacophony of ringing. Some calls were filled with the fury of homeowners, incredulous and demanding to know if this was some cruel joke. Others were tinged with anxiety, seeking a meeting. To negotiate a way forward, Calvin, ever composed, advised them to take their grievances to the HOA president. One evening, the phone rang again, and it was Frances Doyle on the line, her voice carrying the weight of the situation. In a moment of rising tension, she turned to Calvin, her voice laced with urgency. "They're panicking, Calvin. People are discussing the possibility of removing Priscilla from the board. They feel blindsided." Calvin's response was sharp, a reflection of the gravity of the situation. "They should," he said. "She put them in this position." Meanwhile, the world outside was buzzing with news as Elena's article made its way to the front page of the Chronicle. The bold headline proclaimed, "Local rancher fights to A over land claims. He's legal landlord to dozens of homes." The article meticulously detailed the questionable sale of his vast 1,500 acres, alongside the decades-old deed that granted him rights to the subdivision blocks, weaving a tale that would surely stir the community as the week drew to. Close images of Calvin standing resolutely by the ranch fence accompanied the unfolding tale, alongside a snapshot of Priscilla, her discomfort palpable outside the HOA office. Local TV stations began to swarm around Calvin's doorstep, eager for a glimpse into the story. When one reporter finally caught him, he offered a brief statement, his words carefully chosen. "This isn't about revenge. It's about holding people accountable when they abuse power." Yet in the quiet corners of his mind, Calvin understood that this was also a battle of wills, a demonstration. that he would not be silenced, that they had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. He stood resolute, ready to see this battle through to its conclusion. Yet, as the tension escalated around the HOA, Calvin discovered that the developer was not retreating. Their next maneuver promised to elevate the stakes significantly. Just 2 days after the article hit the newsstands, Reed reached out to Calvin with an update. His voice was steady, but an undeniable gravity lingered in his words. It brought. In a major law firm from Dallas, Reed informed him. The developer's name is on the motion, not the HOA. This means they're stepping in to defend the sale. Calvin leaned against his kitchen counter, the phone pressed tightly to his ear, frustration bubbling within him. No standing? Incredulously, they tried to steal my land. Reed's voice came through, calm yet firm, explaining the absurdity of the situation. They're claiming you abandoned it, and they want the court to see your mineral and ground rights to the subdivision blocks as irrelevant. Calvin began to pace the floor, the weight of the words sinking in. So they're trying to cut the legs. Out from under me? He asked, realization dawning. That's exactly what they're trying to do, Reed confirmed, the gravity of the battle ahead settling heavily in the air. Reed leaned in, his voice steady and deliberate. But here's the thing, he began. If we can connect those two issues, we can argue that they acted in bad faith on both fronts. That's where our leverage becomes truly powerful. Later that day, Calvin found himself in Reed's downtown office, the atmosphere charged with anticipation. The conference table was a battleground of information, littered with stacks of documents, property maps, tax receipts, and old correspondence between the Roaches and county officials. Reed's finger traced a highlighted section in the 1993 agreement, his eyes gleaming with excitement. This clause is gold, he declared. Specifies your rights to blocks 3 through 7. They were perpetual and transferable, separable from the land itself, a bond that held great significance. This connection was crucial, the judge recognized. That they had overlooked this clause during the sale, it would reveal a clear intent to sidestep him completely. Calvin leaned back, allowing the weight of this realization to settle in. He envisioned his father at the same table, pen poised, meticulously scrutinizing every line of that agreement. Russell had always emphasized the importance of signing documents that would safeguard one's interests long after they had departed. Now, decades later, those words echoed in Calvin's mind. In a small town where the stakes were high, the advice he received lingered in his mind, a beacon of hope that could very well save the ranch. The first hearing loomed ahead, scheduled for the following Wednesday at the Pine Bluff County Courthouse. Calvin, determined and resolute, arrived early, dressed in a crisp white shirt and pressed jeans, his father's old belt buckle glinting in the light, a quiet reminder of the legacy he was fighting to protect. At the defense table, Priscilla and Wesley sat side by side, their attorneys murmuring strategies in hushed tones. Across the room, 2 sharply dressed men from the developer's side tapped away on their tablets, their expensive watches glinting as they barely acknowledged Calvin's presence, a stark contrast to the weight of the moment. As the judge made his entrance, Reed rose to his feet, ready to unveil the petition to void the sale. With a steady voice, he guided the court through the intricate history of the Rourke family's ownership, shedding light on the HOA's unfounded claim of abandonment. He meticulously recounted the pivotal 1993 agreement that bound Calvin to the subdivision land. Just as he reached a crucial point, the opposing attorney interjected, attempting to dismiss the subdivision rights as a mere distraction from the core issue. But Reed stood firm, addressing the judge with unwavering resolve. "Your Honor," he declared, "the so-called real matter is that my client's property was sold without his consent. These rights reveal a troubling pattern of the defendant's actions." In a tense courtroom, the air was thick with unspoken truths and hidden agendas. The judge, with a steady hand, permitted evidence that cut to the core of the matter. While Priscilla remained resolute, her eyes locked ahead. Yet Calvin noticed the way her fingers clenched the table, a silent testament to the weight of the moment. As the hearing concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Wesley slipped past Calvin, his voice low and laced with warning. "You're making "A lot of enemies, Rourke," he murmured, but Calvin pressed on, unyielding. "You made that choice for me when you signed off on a lie," he shot back, determination fueling his stride. Outside the courthouse, the scene shifted as Alina awaited, her cameraman in tow, ready to capture the unfolding drama. "How do you feel about today's hearing?" she asked. "It's like we're just getting started," Calvin replied, a spark of determination in his voice. They thought he'd be too small to fight back, but they were wrong. That evening, Reed called again, urgency in his tone. "We've got a window," he said. "The judge hasn't made a ruling yet, but she's giving us the chance to submit more supporting evidence before next week. That means anything you've got, photographs, receipts, witness statements. We need to pile it on." Calvin's mind raced as he thought of Donovan, Francis, Gloria, and even the young contractor. Each a piece of the puzzle in this unfolding story. He had conversed with each neighbor by the fence. Every one of them had witnessed something that contradicted the HOA's assertions. If they were brave enough to share their accounts on record, it could provide the crucial momentum the case required. The following day, Calvin set out to knock on doors, not to intimidate, but to collect their stories. He listened intently as neighbors recounted their memories of him working the land, tending to cattle and mending fences. Francis even unearthed old photographs from a 4th of July picnic held on the North Pasture, taken just 2 years prior. By Friday, Reed's office was overflowing with evidence. Calvin sensed the storm brewing, aware that a confrontation loomed ahead. Yet, for the first time since the man in the polo shirt had thrust that envelope into his hands, a flicker of hope ignited within him, a sense of momentum shifting in his favor. But then, like a sudden gust of wind, a letter from the developer's lawyers arrived. A settlement offer that halted him in his tracks. Was this their way of conceding they had crossed a line? The letter came nestled in a heavy cream envelope designed to convey significance. With a swift motion, Calvin drew his pocket knife, slicing it open to reveal 3 neatly typed pages from the developer's legal team. They presented him with a tempting offer for the vast expanse of 1,500 acres, a sum that might lure someone who viewed the land merely as dirt and grass. But Calvin, with a discerning eye, recognized it for what it truly was, buyout designed to silence the struggle without any acknowledgement of wrongdoing. He read the proposal twice, then picked up the phone to call Reed. "They think I can be bought," he said. Reed let out a dry chuckle. "They're making offers this early. It's because they sense the ground slipping beneath them. But I'll tell you this, the numbers are high enough to reveal their concern. I'm not interested." Calvin stood resolute, his voice steady as he declared his intentions. "I'm not just here for a check," he said. "I want the land back, and I want them to experience the sting of defeat." Just 2 days later, the judge delivered her ruling on the preliminary petition. In a surprising turn, the sale of Calvin's land was deemed void, pending a full trial. The ambitious plans of the developer were abruptly halted. The county clerk was instructed to restore the title to Calvin's name until the case reached its conclusion. While it wasn't the ultimate triumph he sought, it was a significant blow. To the HOA and the developer, one they had not anticipated. As dawn broke the very next morning, Calvin and Reed took decisive steps forward. They initiated the landlord action, delivering official notices to every home in blocks 3 through 7, each notice prominently displayed Calvin's name as the property owner, the language clear and unyielding. Rental terms must be negotiated within 30 days, or eviction proceedings would commence. Within hours, the subdivision buzzed with life. Cars rolled into driveways, neighbors huddled in tight circles on the sidewalks, and phones vibrated with the latest news alerts. By evening, Calvin's name had become a local sensation, trending across the community. In the dimming light of dusk, a knock echoed through the quiet of Calvin's porch. It was Clinton Avery, the board member whose words had been measured and careful during the recent meeting. With his hat clutched in hand, he stood there, a figure of uncertainty. "Mr. Rourke," he began, his voice tinged with concern, "I think it's fair to say things have gotten out of hand." The weight of his words hung in the air, a reflection of the turmoil brewing within the community. A lot of folks didn't know about any of this. They trusted Priscilla, and look where that got them. The tension between loyalty and betrayal shimmered in the twilight as the story of their neighborhood unfolded in unexpected ways. Calvin's voice cut through the tension, suggesting that the chaos could have been averted had the board kept a tighter grip on her. Clinton shifted uneasily, pondering if there was a path forward that wouldn't involve uprooting families from their homes. Calvin regarded him thoughtfully, his resolve clear, had no intention of displacing anyone willing to mend the situation. Yet he refused to allow the HOA to act as if they hadn't attempted to seize what was rightfully his. Meanwhile, the phone rang again, and it was Francis Doyle, bringing news that the board had convened an emergency meeting to deliberate on Priscilla's removal from the presidency. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the weight of mounting rent, payments bore down on homeowners, a burden too heavy to bear. 3 nights later, the air was thick with tension as a pivotal meeting unfolded, culminating in a decisive vote. Priscilla found herself ousted, while Wesley, under the guise of personal reasons, stepped back from his role, though silence enveloped them. Whispers of legal consultation swirled in the shadows. With the dawn of new leadership, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Sharon Bell, the newly appointed acting president, reached out to Reed, her voice steady as she proposed a settlement. The HOA would extend a formal apology, recognizing Calvin's rights, a gesture that promised to reshape the community's future. In a tense negotiation, the stakes were high as the discussion turned to blocks 3 through 7. A pact was formed, one that would see Calvin agree to never contest the ownership of the 1,500 acres again. In exchange, he would drop the landlord action against the residents who had signed rental acknowledgments during the busiest days. While it wasn't everything Calvin had hoped for, there would be no admission of wrongdoing regarding the false abandonment claim. It marked a significant public surrender on the key points. Reed, with clarity and purpose, laid it all out. This deal would restore the land to its rightful owner, secure their rights in writing, and place the others in a position of debt. The rest, he assured, could be reclaimed through reputation. As the sun rose, Calvin pondered the decision that lay before him. By morning, he had come to a resolution, not out of a desire to ease the burden on the HOA, but because his father had instilled in him the wisdom of recognizing a battle well fought. The moment the agreement was inked, he understood the victory it represented. Local news cameras captured the scene as Calvin stood resolutely on the courthouse steps. "This isn't just about me," he declared to the gathered crowd. "It's about standing firm when those in power think they can trample over us. We cannot let that go unchallenged, not for a single day, not for a single dollar." As the shutters clicked, he caught sight of a few homeowners from the estates, their faces reflecting a shared resolve. As Calvin stood amidst the crowd, he observed the subtle nods of some, a silent recognition of his presence, while others remained cautious, their eyes filled with uncertainty. He understood that trust was a fragile thing, not easily earned, but that was not his immediate concern. His mission had always been to safeguard what belonged to him, to ensure that no one dared to threaten it again. Yet, the tale was far from over. The consequences of Priscilla's departure would send ripples throughout Pine Bluff County, effects that Calvin had yet to foresee. In the weeks that followed their agreement, the atmosphere in Pine Bluff County shifted. An unspoken change lingered in the air, palpable and profound. In the bustling feed store, the air was thick with chatter, but every conversation seemed to falter as Calvin stepped into the hardware shop. His turned toward him, some filled with admiration, others tinged with doubt. He was no longer just another rancher in their midst. Meanwhile, Priscilla's departure from the HOA created a void that echoed through the community. Without her firm hand guiding decisions, homeowners began to voice grievances, long-buried complaints about escalating fees, consistent rule enforcement, and murky financial dealings. Sharon Bell took it upon herself to lead the board toward a path of clarity and openness. In a community where tensions simmered beneath the surface, fractures ran deep. A handful of residents turned their ire towards her, accusing her of yielding to Calvin. At a meeting, one man rose, his voice echoing with indignation, proclaiming, "We got rolled over by one guy with a cowboy hat and a grudge." The next day, Calvin caught wind of the remark from Francis, who delivered it with a knowing smirk. Sounds like you've got a new nickname in the estates, he teased. Calvin shrugged it off, replying, I've been called worse. Yet, in the quiet corners of his mind, he wrestled with the discomfort of being reduced to a mere symbol of resistance. His struggle was about so much more than just proving a point. In a time when shadows loomed over the estates, one man's resolve shone brightly as he stood to defend his family's legacy. Not all hearts were filled with bitterness. Several residents from blocks 3 through 7 made their way to the ranch, eager to meet Calvin face to face. Among them was an older couple, the Beldens, who arrived bearing a homemade pecan pie. We just wanted to thank you for not throwing us out, Mrs. Belden said, her voice a gentle whisper yet unwavering. We had no idea any of this was going on. Calvin nodded, understanding the weight of her words. I know you didn't, he replied. The people you trusted put you in a bad spot. I'm not here to punish folks for their board's mistakes. And so, amidst the uncertainty, a flicker of hope began to emerge, binding the community together once more. In the aftermath of a tumultuous chapter, a vigilant presence emerged, determined to ensure that the past would not repeat itself. The settlement, though a step forward, could not erase the lingering scars left behind. The developer, shrouded in secrecy, quietly withdrew from Pine Bluff Estates, yet not before divesting their interests in nearby parcels. Whispers filled the air, suggesting they were regrouping, seeking softer targets in neighboring counties. Reed, ever the cautious ally, urged Calvin to remain vigilant. Once a company engages in such underhanded tactics, they seldom cease their pursuit, merely shifting their focus elsewhere. Meanwhile, Elena's article blossomed, gaining momentum as it captured the attention of state papers, spreading its reach far beyond its origins. In a tale that unfolded across the vast landscapes of Texas, Calvin found himself at the center of a remarkable struggle. He stood bravely against the formidable forces of a homeowners association and a developer, emerging victorious in a battle that many thought impossible. As news of his triumph spread, letters began to arrive, each one a testament to the shared experiences of countless others. People from all corners of the state reached out, recounting their own tales of being bullied by HOAs or losing cherished family land to the cruel grip of technicalities. Among these heartfelt messages, one letter resonated deeply with Calvin. It was from a man in Eastland County. His grandparents had faced a similar fate in the 70s, their farm lost to an abandonment claim that still echoed through the years. This connection to the past fueled Calvin's resolve, reminding him that he was not alone in his fight. In a time of uncertainty, a letter arrived, its words echoing the struggles of those who felt powerless. It spoke of rights unknown and battles unwaged, a testament to the courage of one who dared to stand where others could not. Calvin, with a heart full of resolve, tucked that letter away in the leather folder that held his father's deeds, a symbol of the fight that was not his alone. As the community gathered, the HOA found itself compelled to address the settlement. And Sharon Bell stood before them, reading a statement that acknowledged Calvin's rightful claim to blocks 3 through 7, affirming that the vast expanse of 1,500 acres belonged solely to him. The air was thick with a mix of relief and newfound respect, a moment that marked the turning of tides in their shared journey. As she spoke, Calvin stood quietly at the back of the room, observing the varied expressions of the homeowners. Some glanced at him with guarded looks, while others seemed to exhale in relief. After the meeting, a younger homeowner named Eli Comack approached Mr. Rourke. I just wanted to say I didn't like you much when this started. I thought you were just trying to wreck our neighborhood. But after hearing everything, I get it. Now, Calvin offered a small nod, acknowledging the shift in understanding. That's all I needed you to do. Get it. Life at the ranch gradually settled back into its familiar rhythms, with Calvin spending his mornings mending fences. In the warm afternoons, he found solace tending to the cattle, while evenings were spent on the porch cradling a cup of coffee. Yet, every so often, his gaze would drift to the distant subdivision, where roofs and streetlights dotted the horizon. It served as a gentle reminder that a part of his land lay beneath those homes, not in a way that filled him with pride, but as a quiet acknowledgement of the balance he had fought so hard to restore. Months later, the town still buzzed with whispers about the case. For some, it became a cautionary tale of overreaching power, while for others, it transformed into a rallying cry for the protection of property rights. Calvin stood at the edge of a new chapter, the echoes of the fight still lingering in the air, yet his thoughts began to shift. The dust of Pine Bluff County settled around him, and he found clarity in the lessons learned. A truth, one his father had held dear, now became his own guiding light. On a warm spring morning, Calvin finally allowed himself to exhale. The court filings were behind him, the ranch was safe. The subdivision had acknowledged his rightful claim to the land beneath their homes. For the first time in months, a sense of peace washed over him. On a serene morning, he found himself on the back porch, a mug of coffee cradled in his hands. The world around him was still, with no envelope resting on his porch, no stranger lingering at the gate, and no meetings looming on the horizon. Instead, he watched as the pasture grass danced gently in the breeze, while cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. The air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers. Enveloping him in a tranquility, his father had cherished a quiet so profound that it allowed his thoughts to flow freely. Just then, Gloria arrived, her presence brightening the day. She brought with her a jar of homemade blackberry jam. Placing it on the table before gazing out over the expanse of land, sharing in the beauty of the moment. "You did it," she said simply. Calvin smiled faintly. "You did it. You gave me the folder that turned the whole thing around." Gloria shook her head. "I just handed you the past. You're the one who knew what to do with it." They sat for a while, talking about Jasper and Russell, reminiscing about the years when money was tight and the land was the only steady thing they had. It struck Calvin then that the fight hadn't been about winning in court. It had been about honoring the sacrifices that came before him. That afternoon, he drove into town to pick up feed. As Eli Cormack loaded the bags into the truck, his gaze caught sight of a figure across the lot. The determined stride, he approached. "You mind if I ask you something?" Eli inquired. The response came without hesitation. "Go ahead. If you could go back to before all this started, would you still fight it?" Calvin paused for a moment, then replied, "Every time. You can't put a price on what's yours if it's tied to who you are. Once you let someone take it, you'll never get it back." Eli nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of those words as he made his way home. Calvin passed the familiar sign for Pine Bluff Estates, its appearance unchanged, a constant in a world that felt anything but stable. Once the neat white structure stood proudly, adorned with flowers at its base, a symbol of the subdivision's beginning. Yet for him, it had transformed into something far more profound. It was no longer merely a marker. It had become a testament to the hidden imperfections that lay beneath even the most polished surfaces. With a discerning eye, he realized that the truth could widen those cracks, revealing the reality beneath. In the months that followed, a hush settled over the community. He still engaged in occasional conversations with residents about their rental agreements, but most chose to retreat into their own worlds. Some even ventured over to purchase beef directly from the ranch, yet the connections remained distant, lacking warmth. On a warm summer evening, the air was filled with the scent of grass and the promise of twilight as Troy arrived, a cooler of beer in hand. They settled onto the porch, the sun casting a golden hue over the landscape. "You know," Troy began, breaking the comfortable silence, "you could have taken that developer's offer and been set for life. No one would have blamed you." Calvin, taking a thoughtful sip of his beer, replied, "Maybe, but money comes and goes. This land, it's the one thing my family bled for. It's the one thing I can pass down that can't be spent away." A grin spread across Troy's face. "You're a stubborn man, Calvin. Guess it runs in the family." The two friends shared a moment, the weight of their conversation mingling with the fading light, each understanding the depth of what was truly at stake. Calvin watched as the tale slowly slipped from the headlines, overshadowed by the next. Uproar in a distant town, yet in Pine Bluff County, the memory lingered. Whenever the case was mentioned at the diner, it was accompanied by a solemn shake of the head and a soft comment about the rancher who had turned the tide. For Calvin, the lesson was clear. Power prevails only when people are too fearful or weary to resist. But once someone dares to rise, even against a force greater than themselves, the scales can tip. Sometimes that act of courage is all it takes to claim victory. As the evening approached, Calvin stepped out to the fence line where the lights of the subdivision twinkled like stars in the distance. The soft sound of laughter floated through the air from an open backyard, a reminder of the joy that surrounded him. Yet, he felt no bitterness. Instead, a serene satisfaction enveloped him. It was a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing he had honored the legacy of those who had come before him and the land they had entrusted to his care. With a gentle hand resting on the top rail, he murmured softly, more to himself than anyone else, "This stays Rockland always." In that moment, he understood the true lesson of his journey. He wished for others to take away from his tale that certain treasures surpass even the grandest bids, and that holding firm in solitude can forge the most powerful legacy. If you find yourself hearing this and possess something precious, be it your land, your name, or your beliefs, don't linger for someone else to safeguard it. Rise, voice your truth, and ensure it remains yours. And if you crave more narratives like this, remember to subscribe.